back. Getting back to Genesis 26. Short little break. Feeling much better. Let's keep it rolling. Studying the Old Testament. Let's get after it. Alright, Genesis 26, the Philistines. Alright. Pop it on up. Get a nice little image going. Alright. And there was famine in the land, besides the famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went unto Amalek king of the Philistines unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him, and said, Do not go into Egypt, dwell in the land in which I tell thee of sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and I will bless thee, for on thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries. And I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father, and I will make thee seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and give unto thy seed all these countries. In thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed. Because of Abraham obeyed my voice, and I kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister. For he feared, She is my wife, lest he said, The men of this place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when she had been there a long time, that Amalek, king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. And Amalek called Isaac and said, Behold, of surely she is thy wife, and how saidst thou, She is my sister? And Isaac said unto, Because I said, Lest I die for her. Sounds familiar. And Amalek said, What is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have lain with thy wife, and thou shouldst have brought guiltiness upon us. And Amalek charged all his people, saying, That he toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Then Isaac sowed in the land that he received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward, and grew until he became very great. For he had possessions of flocks, and possessions of herds, and great store of servants, and Philistines envisioned him. For all that dwells with his father's servants has digged in the days of Abraham his father. The Philistines had stopped them and fulfilled them with earth. And Amalek said unto Isaac, Go from this, for thou art much mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence, and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar, and dwelt there. And Isaac digged against the wells of water, and which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and had called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And Isaac's servants digged into the valley, and they found there a well of springing water. And the herdsmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, The water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. And they digged another well, and strove for that also, and he called the name of it Sitnah. And he removed them thence. Oh, lost me. And digged another well, and for that they strove not. And he called the name of it Rehoboth. And he said, For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And when he went up from thence to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared unto him the same night, and said, I am God of Abraham thy father, fear not, for I am with thee, and I bless thee, and I multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he builded an altar there, and called it upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants digged a well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Azathoth, one of his friends, and Phelok, the chief captain of his army. And Isaac said unto them, Wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? And they said, We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee, and we said, Let there be now an oath betwixt us, and even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee that thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as with we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now blessed of the Lord. And he made them feast, and they did eat and drink, and they rose up betimes in the morning, and swore one to another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. And it came to pass the same day, sorry, where was I? And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, We have found water. And he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba unto this day. And Esau was 40 years old when he took his wife Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief mind unto Isaac and Rebekah. All right. Genesis 26 is a fascinating, unique chapter in the book of Genesis because it's the only chapter in the entire Bible where Isaac primarily stands alone as the main character, as the primary standalone main character. In the surrounding narrative, Isaac acts as a bridge between the larger-than-life father Abraham and his hyperactive son Jacob. But here the lens zooms in exclusively on Isaac. Hold on 1 second. All right. The primary literary takeaway of Genesis 26 is to show that Isaac is the mirror image to the heir Abraham. He faces the exact same trials, struggles with the exact same fears, and falls into the same sins, ultimately inherits the exact same divine blessings. I knew it sounded familiar. Here's the deep context behind the drama and the repeating history of the water wars in Genesis 26. Chapter opens with a harsh reality check, and there was famine in the land, and besides the famine, that was the days of Abraham. Faced with starvation, Isaac prepares to do exactly what his father did. Pack up the caravan, head south to Egypt, but God physically steps in to the storyline to alter his route. He tells Isaac, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land in which I shall tell thee of. God challenges Isaac to stay in Canaan despite The economic collapse and the formally repeats the massive Abrahamic covenant directly to him. God promises to give Isaac all these countries, to multiply his descendants like the stars, and to bless all nations of the earth through his line, explicitly because Abraham obeyed my voice. Genesis 26, 4 through 5. This critical theological moment, the covenant is no longer just Abraham's contract, it's officially transferred to the second generation. Isaac obeys, pulling his tents up to settle in the border territory of Gerar. The history repeats itself with "she is my sister," like father, like son. The moment Isaac settles in Gerar, his encounters with the local ruler, King Amlamek, the royal title in Philistia, much like the Pharaoh in Egypt or Caesar in Rome. This is likely the son or the successor of Amlamek who dealt with Abraham in chapter 20 and 21. Instantly, Isaac falls into his father's old fear-driven trap. When the local men ask him about his beautiful wife Rebekah, he panics and lies. "She is my sister," for he feared to say, "She is my wife," lest he thought the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah. The truth is exposed in a highly cinematic way. King Amlamek looks out a palace window one afternoon and catches Isaac sporting or playing affectionately with Rebekah in a way that no brother ever would. At this point, he should be like 40 years old, right? Gotta keep the playful marriage alive. The Hebrew word for sporting is medzach, which is a direct pun on Isaac's own name, Yitzhak. Abimelech calls Isaac into the court and thoroughly chews him out for exposing the kingdom to divine guilt. The king issues a royal decree protecting the couple under penalty of death. Once protected, Isaac experienced explosive supernatural economic growth. He plants crops and reaps a staggering 100-fold harvest in a single year because the Lord blessed him. He accumulates massive herds of flocks and servants until the text notes that the local, Philistines deep down envied him. His envy sparks bitter, passive-aggressive resource war. The Philistines take all the water wells that Abraham's servant had dug decades earlier and plugs them with dirt. King Amlamek tells Isaac to pack up and leave. "Go from us, for art thou much mightier than we." In an arid desert climate, filling a well with dirt was a hostile act of economic sabotage. It was an attempt to starve out Isaac's livestock and force him off the grid. Isaac takes the high road rather than staring at a bloody civil war with his primitive militia. He retreats into the valley of Gerar and begins patiently grueling process of redigging his father's old wells, deliberately calling them by the exact same name his father had used. As Isaac's servants dig deeper into the valley, they strike a vein of precious rushing underground water, springing water, so to speak. The local herdsmen of Gerar immediately swoop down in to claim an ownership of water. Watch how Isaac names the wells based on the escalating legal and physical friction. Well 1 is Esek, meaning contention or struggle, because the local herders argued over it. Well 2 is Sineth, meaning enmity or hostility, sharing the same root word as Satan/accuser because of the fight intensified. Well, number 3 is Rehoboth. Isaac moves further away and digs a third well. This time nobody fights him for it. He names it Rehoboth, which means broad place or room, declaring, "For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." The chapter comes to a triumphant close when Isaac moves his camp back to the historic site of Beersheba. That very night, God appears to him again to confront him. Fear not, for I am with thee. Isaac builds an altar, pitches his tent, and his servants strike water yet again. Seeing Isaac's unstoppable success, the divine backing, King Abimelech marches out to meet him along with his military advisor and general. Isaac confronts them bluntly. Wherefore come ye to me? Seeing ye hates me, I have sent me away from you. The pagan leaders confess their undeniable reality. We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee. They request a formal binding covenant, peace of non-aggression. Isaac hosts a massive feast for them. They swear mutual legal oaths following the morning, and the site is officially locked down as a place of peace. Genesis 26 provides an ancient reader that Isaac is not a weak link in the chain by honoring his father's legacy, digging his father's wells, and handling hostility with quiet, faithful dignity. Isaac secures his place as a massive independent patriarch of the nation of Israel. Interesting. Genesis 27. Jacob, and it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his eldest son, and said unto him, My son. He said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold, now I am old, and I know not the day of my death. Now therefore taketh, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver, thy bow, and go out to the field and take some venison, and make some savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. And Rebekah heard Isaac spake to Esau his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt for venison, and bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice, according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch me thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, and he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man, and my father peradventure will feel me. Peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. And this his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son, only obey my voice, and go fetch me them. And he went, and he fetched, and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. And Rebekah took godly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, and upon the smooth of his neck. And she gave the savory meat and the bread which she had prepared unto the hands of her son Jacob. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am. Who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according to thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, I sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee. that I may feel thee, my son, whether it be thou, my very son Esau, or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, and his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. And he said, Art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, Bring it near to me, and I will eat my son's venison, and that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near to him, and he did eat. And he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, kiss me, my son. And he came near, and he kissed him. And he smelled the smell of his raiment, and blessed him, and said, See, I smell of my son, as the smell of the field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of earth, and the plenty corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee, and be Lord over thy brethren. And let thy mother's son bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made the end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came from his hunting. And he also had made savory meat, and brought it unto his father, and said unto his father, Let my father arise, and eat of his son's venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac's father said unto him, Who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau. And Esau trembled very exceedingly, and said, Who? Where is he that hath taken venison, and brought it to me? And have I eaten all before thou came, and have blessed thee? Yea, and he shall be blessed. And when Esau heard these words of his father, he cried with great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, O my father. And he said, Thy brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, Is not he rightly named Jacob, for hath supplanted me these 2 times? He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And now he says, Hast thou not reserved blessing for me? And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him thy lord, and his brethren I given to him for servants. And with corn and wine I have sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son? And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of earth, and the dew of the heaven from above. And by thy sword thou shalt live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass that when thou shalt have dominion, thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. And these words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah, and she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said unto him, Behold, thy brother Esau, as touching thee, doth confirm him, purposely killing thee. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice and rise. Flee thou to Laban, my brother, to Haran, and tarry with him a few days until thy brother's fury turn away, until thy brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forget that which thou hast done to him. Then I will send and fetch thee from thence. Why should I deprave also of you both in one day? And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heath. If Jacob take a wife of daughters of Heath, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what shall I do? What good shall my life do me? Crazy. Stealing the blessings of his brother. How could you, man? Genesis is the absolute dramatic centerpiece of the Jacob-Esau cycle. It's a cinematic thriller built upon sensory deception, raw family betrayal, and the devastating breakdown of the parental unit. Decades have passed since Esau casually sold his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew in chapter 25. Two chapters ago, decades have passed. Isaac is now old, completely blind, and he believes he's on the verge of death. He calls his favorite rugged son Esau to his bedside to set his final affairs in order. Here's the deep cultural context of how the ultimate identity theft in ancient literature went down. To understand why everyone panics in this chapter, we have to realize that in the ancient Near East, a patriarch's deathbed blessing, baraka, was not just a sentimental good luck wish. It was a formal, legally binding oral contract in a world without written wills or digital public records. Spoken words delivered by a dying patriarch carried the weight of absolute, unalterable law. Once those words left Isaac's mouth, they could never be recalled, deleted, transferred, or even were spoken to the wrong person by mistake. The intended plan, Isaac's choice, was to bless Esau, defying God's 25-chapter oracle. The counterplot, Rebekah's plan, deceive Isaac to ensure the chosen line continues. Wow. So Isaac was going against God's will, and Rebekah actually was facilitating God's will. And she had Jacob betray Esau. Isaac's instructions to Esau to go out into the field and hunt some wild game, cook up his favorite savory meat, and bring it to the bedside so he can formally bless him as the next head of the family. Rebekah is eavesdropping outside the tent curtain, knowing God's original prophecy that the elder shall be served knowing God's original prophecy that the elder shall serve the younger, and seeing that her husband Isaac is about to pass the cosmic blessing of Abraham to the spiritually apathetic Esau, she jumps into action. She pulls Jacob aside and outlines the high stakes, terrifyingly precise plot of deception. Jacob is completely petrified, but not because of moral objection. He explicitly objects based on the physical logistics of the fraud. Behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father, peradventure, will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. Rebekah assumes full responsibility, uttering the famous, chilling line, "Upon me be thy curse, my son, only obey my voice." Rebecca utilizes her intimate knowledge of her blind husband's fading senses to completely rig the environment. She creates an elaborate multi-sensory disguise for Jacob. Reading the taste, Rebecca takes 2 young goats from the flock and cooks them into a rich, heavily spiced, savory stew that perfectly mimics the taste and texture of wild game Isaac loves. Simulating the hair, because Esau is famously covered in thick hair, Rebecca takes skins of the slaughtered goats and wraps them tightly around Jacob's smooth hands and exposes the skin of his neck. She dresses Jacob in Esau's personal rugged outdoor garments, even though Isaac cannot see. The texture and weight of his clothes add to the illusion. Esau's clothes carry the heavy, distinct aroma of open wilderness, fields, and hunting grounds. The scent proves to be the ultimate psychological trigger that breaks Esau's skepticism. Jacob walks into the dark tent holding a plate of meat. What follows is a deeply tense, agonizing verbal interrogation. Isaac, highly suspicious of from the very beginning, he asks, "Who art thou, my son?" Jacob looks his blind father in the eye and delivers a flat-out lie. "I am Esau, thy firstborn." Isaac's suspicion escalates because the food was prepared impossibly fast. When he questions this, Jacob crosses a massive spiritual boundary, invoking the divine name to cover his fraud. "Because the Lord thy God brought it to me." Still unconvinced, Isaac commands Jacob to come close so he can physically feel his skin. He runs his old hands over the goat skin on Jacob's neck and arms. This leads to the famous tragic sign of confusion in verse 22. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are hands of Esau. Isaac stands at a crossroads. His ears tell him that it's Jacob, but his hands tell him it is Esau. And finally, he asks for a kiss, leans in close, and smells the outdoor aroma of Esau's garments. The smell completely overrides his ears. Isaac declares, "See, the smell of my son as the smell of the field in which the Lord hath blessed," and pours the unalterable, supreme, patriarchal blessing to Jacob. Wow. The dramatic tensions peak as the split second Jacob finishes the scam and slips out the back of the tent. Esau walks in through the front entrance, carrying his freshly cooked wild game, saying, "Let my father arise and eat his son's venison." Isaac is hit by an immediate wave of physical shock. The text notes that Isaac trembled exceedingly. He realizes that he's been completely outmaneuvered by his own family. He gasps out the terrifying legal reality to Esau, "I have blessed him, and he shall be blessed." Esau lets out a great, exceedingly bitter cry, weeping openly over his stolen destiny. He begs his father, "Hast thou one blessing? My father, bless me, even me also, O my father." But it's too late. The primary blessing of the family supremacy is gone. Isaac can only offer Esau a secondary, harsher word. He will live away from the fatness of the earth. He will live by his sword, and he will serve his younger brother. Though eventually he will break his brother's yoke from his neck. Genesis 27 closes with the ominous note of impending bloodshed. Esau harbors a murderous rage, declaring in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will slay my brother Jacob." Rebecca catches wind of the murder plot and realizes her family is about to collapse into bloodshed. She executes one final scheme, convincing a weary Isaac that Jacob must send her away to the homeland in Mesopotamia. That Isaac must send Jacob, that Isaac, a weary Isaac, that Jacob must be sent away to her homeland in Mesopotamia to find an appropriate bride from her extended family rather than marry a local Canaanite woman. Jacob packs up his bag and runs for his life, leaving the tents of his parents behind as a penniless fugitive. He won't return home for 20 years. Through this deception, Jacob finally grabbed the blessing, but the immediate consequences of his trickery is absolute exile, isolation, and a taste of his own medicine when he encounters the equally deceptive Uncle Laban. Crazy. Genesis 28 is flight and division. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him, and charged him, and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, and go to Padan-aram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty blesses thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and giveth thee the blessing of Abraham. To thee and thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. And Isaac sent away Jacob. And he went to Padan-aram unto Laban, son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob and Esau's mother. Where Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob, and sent him away to Padan-aram to take a wife from thence, and that he blessed him, he gave him a charge, saying, Thou shalt take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother, and was gone to Padan-aram. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac's father, then went Esau unto Ishmael, and took unto wives which he had, Mahalath, and daughters of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebajoth, to be his wife. And Jacob went out from Beersheba, and she went towards Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place, and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took the stones of that place, and put them for his pillow, and lay down in the place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up to the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending onto it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac, and the land where thou liest, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and I will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee into the land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. And Jacob awakened from his sleep, and he said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid, and I said, How dreadful is this place! This is none but other the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose in the early morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillow and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city was called Luz at first. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, I will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone which I have set for the pillar shall be God's house. And all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give it the tenth unto thee. Tithing. Genesis chapter 8 is a monumental transitional chapter that marks Jacob's sudden transformation from a manipulative, homebody Shermer into a terrified, visionary pilgrim. Having just executed the high-stakes identity theft of his patriarchal blessing in chapter 27, Jacob is forced to flee from his home in Beersheba to escape his brother Esau's murderous rage. He leaves behind the wealthy, protective tents of his parents and sets out completely alone on a dangerous 500-mile trek northward to Haran, modern-day border of Syria and Turkey. He is a penniless fugitive, wandering through hostile wilderness. It is at his absolute lowest, most vulnerable point, stripped of his family, his safety, and his confidence, that Jacob experiences his first direct encounter with God. About 50 miles into his journey, the sun goes down. Jacob is stranded out in the open, rocky hill country of Canaan, with no city or inn nearby to shelter him. He has to sleep out under the stars. The text drops a gritty, uncomfortable detail in this verse. He takes one of the rough natural stones of that place and puts it under his head for a pillow. This rock pillow is a stark visual of his new reality. Just days earlier, he was the favored son resting on comfortable cushions inside his mother's tent, eating gourmet goat stew. Now he's sleeping in the dirt with a rock for a headrest. As Jacob falls into a deep sleep, he experiences a vivid, cosmic nightmare vision that shatters his understanding of reality. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder stairway set up on earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Genesis 28:12. To understand what Jacob saw, we have to look back at the architectural world of ancient Mesopotamia that we encountered in Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel. The Hebrew word traditionally translated as ladder is sulam, which modern linguists reveal is more accurately translated as ramped, monumental staircase. Jacob wasn't looking at a wooden painter's ladder leaning against a cloud. He was looking at a massive cosmic ziggurat, a grand staircase connecting heaven and earth. Thinking about the radical theology happening here, at the Tower of Babel, humans tried to manufacture their own industrial brick ziggurat to force their way up into heaven to make a name for themselves, and it resulted in a curse. Here Jacob is doing absolutely nothing. He is completely knocked out, asleep on a rock, and God grants him a vision of a divine staircase. Heaven is not something humans can climb up through technology or ambition. It is a portal that God voluntarily opens and lets down to earth by his own grace. The angels are acting as divine couriers, managing the cosmic travel between the celestial throne room and the earthly dirt. Suddenly perspective shifts. God grants a stand right above the cosmic staircase and speaks directly to the sleeping trickster. God formally introduces himself. I am the Lord, God of Abraham thy father, and God of Isaac. Then he officially transfers the grand, multi-generational Abrahamic covenant directly to Jacob. Is God's will foreshadowed earlier on. The physical deed, the very dirt you are sleeping on, I will give it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. Through your family, all the nations of the planet will be blessed. But then look at the deeply personal protective warranty God adds to the contract in verse 15, promise specifically tailored to the terrified fugitive running for his life. And behold, I am with thee, and I will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee. Notice the staggering omission. God does not mention Jacob's sins. He doesn't bring up the stolen birthright, the goat's skin disguise, or the flat-out lies Jacob told to his blind father. Jacob deserved a curse for his deception, but God meets him with an absolute wall of unconditional grace, presence, and protection. The awakening panic and consecration. Jacob jolts awake in the middle of the dark night, hyperventilating, shaking with primal fear. His response is raw. Verse 16 through 17. Surely the Lord is in his place, and I knew it not. How dreadful, awesome this place is. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gateway to heaven. Jacob realized that the wild, uninhabited desert was an empty space. He had accidentally pitched his tent right on top of the literal cosmic portal where heavens linked onto earth. He renames the anonymous location Bethel, which translates directly to the house of God, before the local Canaanite city was called Luz. The chapter closes with Jacob making a formal vow to God, even though he has just witnessed a mind-bending cosmic vision. He receives an absolute guarantee from the creator of the universe. Jacob calculating deal-making nature splits. Through the text, he tries to structure the promise into a conditional marketplace contract. If God will be with me, and if he will keep me safe on this trip, and if he will give me bread to eat and clothes to wear, and if I bring my skin back to my father's house in one piece, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone pillar will be God's house, and I will give God 10% tax, a tithe of everything I earn. Jacob is still trying to manage his destiny and bargain with God the same way he bargained with Esau's birthright over a bowl of soup. He hasn't fully learned how to simply surrender and trust. Nevertheless, with the oil drying on the stone pillar of Bethel, Jacob picks up his walking staff, marches towards Mesopotamia. When he crosses chapter 29, he's going to walk straight into the household of his uncle Laban, a master conman who is even more deceptive than Jacob, and who will spend the next 20 years giving Jacob a taste of his own medicine. Chapter 29, Genesis 29, Laban's daughters. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east, and he looked, and he beheld a well in the field, and lo, there was 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and the great stone was upon the well's mouth, and thither there were all flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the sheep. But the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, wherehence ye be? And they said, Of Haran we are. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban son of Nahor? And nor they said, We know him. And he shall say unto them, He is well. And they say, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, It is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should go gather together. Water ye sheep and go and feed them, he said. We cannot until the flocks be gathered together, until the row of stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. And while ye spake with him, Rachel came with her daughter, father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass, when Laban heard these tidings of Jacob's, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, should thou therefore serve me, or not? Tell me, why shall thy wages be? What shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters, and the name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with thee. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had for her. And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, my days are fulfilled, that I may go unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah his maid for an handmaid. And it came to pass in that the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? And Laban said, It must not be done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so, fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter, Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet another 7 years. And the Lord saw that Leah was hated, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, Surely the Lord has took upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard what I was hated, and the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Now this time will be my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, Now I praise the Lord. Therefore she came his name Judah, and left bearing. Genesis 29 plunges Jacob straight into the world of poetic justice. After decades of acting as the ultimate family trickster, scamming his brother out of his birthright and using sensory disguise to deceive his blind father, Jacob finally crosses paths with his match, his fiercely manipulative uncle Laban. This chapter records Jacob's arrival in Haran, this instantaneous love at first sight encounter with his cousin Rachel, and devastating taste of his own medicine on his wedding night. Here is the deep historical, cultural, and literary context behind the ultimate marital bait and switch in ancient history. Jacob arrives at the communal well in Haran, the exact same region where Abraham's servant had traveled decades earlier to recruit Rebekah for Isaac in chapter 24. But watch now as the author uses a brilliant literary comparison to highlight Jacob's penniless, desperate status. Abraham's servant arrives with a massive caravan of 10 camels loaded with heavy gold jewelry, while Jacob the fugitive arrives entirely alone on foot, carrying absolutely nothing but his walking staff. While Abraham's servant stands back while a servant woman draws water for him. Jacob spots Rachel approaching her with her father's sheep and performs a massive feat of physical strength, single-handedly rolling a giant heavy stone off the mouth of the well to water her flock himself. Overwhelmed with emotion, relief, and attraction, Jacob kisses Rachel and literally breaks down weeping. Rachel runs home to tell her father Laban. Just like he did in chapter 24, Laban rushes out to greet the traveler. But the moment he realizes Jacob has arrived as a broken refugee with no bridal gifts or wealth, the dynamic immediately shifts from Jacob's hospitality to cold-blooded economic exploitation. Alright, Jacob stays with Laban for a month, working hard in the fields. Laban, realizing how valuable Jacob's labor is, pitches a business arrangement. Because thou art my brother, should thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me what thy wages be. The narrator pauses to introduce Laban's two daughters, Leah, described as tender-eyed, a Hebrew idiom that could mean soft, delicate, weak, or failing eyesight, lacking vivid spark prized in the ancient world. Rachel the younger, described as beautiful and well-favored, stunning in both form and facial features. Jacob is head over heels in love with Rachel because she has no money or gold to pay the traditional mohar, the ancient bride price paid to a woman's family to seal the marriage contract. He offers a staggering alternative. I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. When the 7 years are up, Jacob demands his bride. Laban throws a massive communal wedding feast, complete with heavy drinking that lasts late into the night. When darkness falls, Laban executes a flawless, ruthless deception. He takes his elder daughter, Leah, blankets her in a thick traditional bridal veil, and leads her into the pitch-black bridal tent. Jacob, heavily intoxicated and operating in total darkness, sleeps with her, completely unaware of the swap. Then he becomes the brutal single-sentence climax in verse 26. It came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. Jacob, absolutely furious, he storms into Laban's quarters, demanding answers. What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? Laban responds with a calm, chilling excuse that serves as the ultimate moral punchline for Jacob's life. It must not be so done in our country to give the younger brother before the firstborn. Laban hits Jacob like a physical blow. Laban's words hit Jacob like a physical blow, thinking about the intense irony happening here. Chapter 27, Jacob's crime. He ignored the rule of the firstborn to steal the older brother's blessing in the darkness. In chapter 29, he invokes the law of the firstborn to force his older brother into his older daughter onto Jacob in the dark. Poetic justice. Jacob refuses his father's physical blindness to swap roles with his brother. Now Laban uses the physical blindness of the night to swap the younger sister for the older sister. Jacob is forced to look into the mirror and confront the agonizing pain of deception from the victim's perspective. Jeez. Laban, completely in control of the negotiation, leverages the situation to exact even more free labor from his nephew. He tells Jacob to finish out the traditional 7-day wedding week with Leah. In exchange, he will give him Rachel immediately as well, provided Jacob signs a contract to work another 7 consecutive weeks for free. Jacob, desperate for Rachel, submits to the extortion. He marries Rachel a week later, but the chapter closes on a deeply tragic, heartbreaking note of domestic warfare. And he loved also Rachel more than Leah. Seeing that Leah was unloved and rejected, the Lord steps into the family drama and opens Leah's womb while keeping Rachel barren. Leah gives birth to 4 consecutive sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. With every single child she bears, Leah desperately names the boy in hopes that her husband will finally love her. Reuben means see a son, because she thinks, now therefore my husband will love me. This agonizing marital power struggle sets up a massive baby-making war in chapter 30. These children, born without a chaotic polygamous web of jealousy and deceit, will grow up to become founding patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, carrying the baggage of this intense family dysfunction straight into the next generation. Genesis 30. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, I am in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife. And Jacob went unto her, and Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had began bearing, she took Zilpah her maid, and gave her Jacob to wife. And Zilpah's maid bare Jacob a son, and Leah said, the troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah Leah made bear Jacob a second son. And Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher. And when Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest, and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them unto his mother Leah, Then Rachel said to Leah, Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrake. And she said unto her, Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldest thou taketh away my son mandrake also? And Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee the night for thy son's mandrake. And Jacob came unto the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him, and said, Thou'st come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night, and God hearkened unto Leah, and she convinced him to bear Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden my husband. And she has called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bare Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God hath endured me with a good dowry, and now my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him six sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bare a daughter, and called her Dinah. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her, and opened her womb. And she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, The Lord shall add me another son. And it came to pass that when Jacob had borne Joseph, and Jacob had said unto Laban, Send me away, that I may go unto my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which had done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, Appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, Thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me, and for it was little with thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming, and now I shall provide for mine own household also. And he said, What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me anything, if thou wilt do this thing for me. I will again feed and keep thy flock, and I will pass all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle amongst the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and such shall be my hire. So shall my righteous answers for me be in the time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, Behold, I would might it be according to thy word. And he removed that day the he goats that were ring-staked and spotted, and all the she goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob, and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar, and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and piled white stakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had piled before the flock in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, before forth cattle ring straight, speckled and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flock toward the ring straight, and all the brown flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whenever the strongest cattle did conceived that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, and they might conceive amongst the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in, so the feebler were Laban and the strong Jacob's. And the man exceedingly had much cattle, and the maidservants and menservants, and camels and asses. Genesis 30 plunges straight into the chaotic, escalating depths of what can only be described as an ancient baby-making war. Following the wedding of deception in chapter 29, Jacob is locked into a highly dysfunctional, polygamous household living with two sisters who are fiercely competing for his affectionate status, and the future of the family line. Because the children represent ultimate security, legacy, and economic power in the ancient Near East, the sisters turn to the domestic arena into a high-stakes battlefield. Here is the deep context behind the bizarre handmade strategies, the strange mandrake deal, and the livestock trickery of Genesis 30. The chapter opens up with Rachel hitting the breaking point of despair and jealousy. While her sister Leah has already churned out 4 sons, Rachel remains barren. She throws a desperate tantrum at Jacob, screaming, "Give me children or else I die." Jacob gets furious, snapping back that he can't override the biology of God. So Rachel resorts to the exact same Babylonian legal fallback that Sarah used in chapter 16. Surrogate motherhood via proxy handmaid. She hands over her maid Bilhah to Jacob. Bilhah gives birth to Dan and Naphtali, and Rachel claims them as her own. Seeing her own childbearing pause, Leah deploys her maid Zipporah, and Zipporah gives birth to Gad and Asher. The sisters view these children strictly as tactical military victories. When Naphtali is born, Rachel explicitly boasts, "With great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed." In the middle of this intense standoff, a high, strange, gritty incident occurs involving mandrakes, the Duodim in Hebrew. Leah's oldest son, Reuben, goes out into the wheat fields during harvest and finds these wild plants, bringing them home to his mother. The moment Rachel sees them, she begs Leah, "Give me, I pray thee, thy son's mandrakes." Leah flips out, yelling, "It is a small matter that thou hast taken my husband, and wilt thou take away my son's mandrakes also?" The cultural context of mandrakes. Why are they fighting so bitterly over a common rooted plant? In the ancient world, the mandrake root, which naturally grows in the shape resembling a human body, was highly prized as a powerful aphrodisiac and fertility drug. Rachel is desperate to overcome her barrenness, and Leah is desperate to regain access to Jacob's bed. Rachel proposes a direct business transaction where she will trade her night of marital intimacy with Jacob in exchange for fertility roots. Leah agrees to the deal when Jacob walks home from working the fields. That evening, Leah literally intercepts him outside the camp and says, "Thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes." Jacob, acting as a passive pawn in the instructional chess match, complies. This transaction results in Leah bearing 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulon, and a daughter named Dinah. Finally, after years of agonizing silence, watching her sister and her husband's and the handmaids fill the camp with children, the narrative shifts back to the primary love story. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb. Rachel gives birth to her first biological son. She names him Joseph, in Hebrew Yosef, which carries a clever double meaning based on Hebrew root words. It sounds as if, Asif, God has taken away my reproach. It acts as prayer for Joseph. May the Lord add to me another son. Joseph's birth breaks the structural deadlock of the family the moment Joseph is born. Jacob looks at the child. His beloved Rachel realizes his 14-year labor contract with Laban has officially ended and decides it is finally time to gather his massive family and escape back to the promised land. The final chapter shifts from domestic baby making to high-stakes agricultural warfare. Jacob tells Laban he wants to leave. Laban, knowing that God made him immensely wealthy solely because of Jacob's management, tries to trap him into staying by, offering to pay whatever wages he wants. Jacob drops a highly unusual, low-risk counteroffer. He will stay and manage the flocks, but his only payment will be the speckled, spotted, and black sheep and goats born from that point forward. Laban looks at the herd, which consists of almost entirely solid white sheep and solid dark goats, and realizes the odds of spotted animals being born are biologically minuscule. Laban thinks he is robbing Jacob blind, signs the deal, and then sneakily sneaks out into the herd that night to remove all currently spotted animals 3 days journey away so they can't crossbreed. Jacob, running his own operation, outmaneuvers his uncle using ancient folklore-style veterinary method. He takes a fresh rod of poplar, hazel, chestnut trees, peels the white streaks into them, and places these striped visual patterns directly into the water through the water troughs where the strongest animals gather to mate. The strategy works flawlessly. Every time the strongest, healthiest livestock mate, they produce striped, speckled, and spotted offspring. When the weak animals mate, Jacob removes the rods. The chapter closes with Jacob completely turning the table on his manipulative uncle. He becomes exceedingly wealthy, accumulates massive healthy flocks, maidservants, menservants, camels, and donkeys. The penniless fugitive who arrived with nothing but a walking staff has officially built the superpower estate, setting the stage for a dramatic, high-speed midnight escape from Laban's territory in chapter 31. Genesis 31. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away that was our father's, and that which was our father's hath gotten all his glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not towards him as before. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy father, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's continuance, that is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then the cattle bared speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-streaked shall be thy hire, then bear thy cattle ring-streaked. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leapt upon the cattle were the ring-streaked and speckled and grizzled, And the angels of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. I say, here I am. And he said, lift up now thine eyes and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle, and the ring-streaked and speckled and grizzled, for I have seen that Laban doeth unto thee, and I am God of Bethel, where thou anointed the pillar, and where thou vowed a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath unto thee do. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten. The cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Pandaram, for to go to Isaac and his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unaware to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face towards the Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. He took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and then they overtook him in Mount Gilead. And God came to him, take the steed, that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched the mountain of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captive, taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me? And didst thou tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with song, with tabreth, with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and daughters? Thou hast not done foolishly in so doing. It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your father spake to me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now though thou wouldst need be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure thou wouldst take by force thy daughters from me, with whom thou findest thy God, let them not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it therefore thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. Laban went into Jacob's tent, and led into Leah's tent, and into the 2 maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them into the camel's furniture and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found not. He said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of woman is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. And Jacob was wroth, and chode with Laban. Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it there before thee, my brethren, and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us. This 20 years I have been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and thy rams, thy flock have not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day, drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and sleep by departed from mine eyes. Thus I have been 20 years in thy house, and I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hast sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction and the labor of my hand, and rebuked me yesternight. And Laban answered, said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine, and what I can do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne. Now therefore cometh thou, let us make a covenant, and thou, let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar, and Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones, and they took it stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Gilead and Mizpah. For he said, the Lord watches between me and thee when we were absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, if thou shalt taketh other wives besides my daughters, no man is with thee. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, behold this pillar, in which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that shalt not pass over this heap and the pillar unto me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mound, and called his brethren to eat the bread. And they did eat bread, and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. Genesis 31 marks the definitive end of Jacob's 20-year era of exile and exploitation in Mesopotamia. Following the livestock genetics warfare of chapter 30, the atmosphere in Haran turns toxic. Jacob notices Laban's sons are grumbling, accusing him of stealing their father's wealth. Jacob notices that Laban's sons are grumbling, accusing him of stealing their father's wealth. Laban's attitude towards him has noticeably soured. With these tensions boiling over, God shatters the silence and commands Jacob to pack up and return to the promised land. What follows is a high-stakes midnight escape, a cinematic high-speed pursuit, and final tense legal settlement that permanently divides the border between two families. Before making the move, Jacob calls a secret meeting between his primary wives, Rachel and Leah, out in the open fields where no one can eavesdrop. Jacob lays out his case, explaining that despite Laban's ruthless changing his wages 10 times over the years, God supernaturally protected him and redirected Laban's wealth into Jacob's hands. Rachel and Leah are completely unified with their husband. They harbor intense resentment towards their father, declaring in verse 14 and 15, "Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us and hath quite devoured our money." Laban had threatened his own daughters like disposable commodities. They give Jacob the green light to flee. Jacob waits until Laban goes into the countryside for an annual sheep herding festival, a massive distraction that took many days. Jacob multiplies his entire estate. He loads his wives and his children onto camels and gathers his massive herds of livestock and crosses the Euphrates River, heading south towards the mountains of Gilead. Before they can clear camp, Rachel slips into her father's tent and steals his teraphim, household idol. Why steal these idols? In ancient Near East, documented by the Nubi's tablets, possession of the family teraphim carried a massive legal weight. The person holding the household gods possessed the primary title and deed to the patriarch's estate and inheritance. Rachel was executing a sneaky piece of corporate theft, ensuring that she took her legal share of her father's legacy. It takes 3 full days for the word to reach Laban that Jacob had fled. Furious at the sudden loss of his labor force and his household goods, Laban assembles a heavily armored militia of his kinsmen and launches a furious 7-day pursuit. He tracks down Jacob, cornering the caravan in the mountains of Gilead. Laban is fully prepared to execute a violent, bloody massacre, but the night before he closes in, God violently hijacks the plot. He appears to Laban in a dream, issuing a terrifying, legalistic warning. "Take heed that thou speak not of Jacob either good or bad," meaning do not try to force him back or harm him, or you will answer to me. When they meet the next morning, a highly tense verbal shouting match explodes. Laban tries to play the victim, demanding to know why Jacob fled like a captive and didn't let him kiss his daughters goodbye. Then he drops the real hammer, and "Now wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" Jacob, completely unaware that Rachel had stolen the idols, issues a confident, high-stakes decree, with whomsoever thou finds thy God, let him not live. Laban conducts a systematic tent-by-tent search of the entire encampment. He tears through Jacob's tent, Leah's tent, and the handmaid's tent, and finds nothing. Finally, he steps into Rachel's tent. Rachel executes a brilliant piece of deceptive camouflage. She takes the idols, stuffs them inside a large camel saddlebag, sits directly on top of them, and politely tells her father, "Let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me." By invoking her menstrual cycle, "Let it not be displeased, my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of woman is upon me." By invoking her menstrual cycle, she relies on ancient purity laws that made her and everything she sat on ritually untouchable. Laban, unwilling to search her saddle, walks away empty-handed. With Laban's search of total failure, Jacob undergoes a fierce transformation. The quiet homebody of chapter 5 is gone. Jacob unleashes 20 years of pent-up rage, screaming at Laban in soaring defense of his integrity. "This 20 years I have been with thee, the rams of thy flock have not eaten that which was torn, the beast I brought not unto thee, I bear the loss of it. In the day of the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and the sleep departed from mine eyes, except thy God of father had been with me. Surely thou hast seen my way now empty." Laban, completely outmatched by Jacob's rage and handcuffed by God's dream warning, backs down, professes a formal non-aggression peace treaty. They give the monument two names based on their different languages. Laban calls it Yeger Sedutha, which is Aramaic, and Jacob calls it Gilead Hebrew, both meaning the heap of witness. It also given the famous name Mitzvah, watchtower, with Laban issuing a chilling parting warning. The Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent from one another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives, God is witness betwixt me and thee. They swear a solemn oath that neither family will ever cross the specific heap of stones to do no harm to the other. Laban wakes up early morning, kisses his daughters and grandchildren goodbye, and turns back north to Mesopotamia forever. With the treaty of Laban permanently removed at his back secured, Jacob turns around to face the front lines, but his relief is short-lived. To march back to the promised land, he must cross now the territory of his brother Esau and the man who swore to murder him 20 years ago, setting the stage for a terrifying supernatural showdown at the river of Jabbok. Wow. All right. Genesis chapter 32. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's host, and he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent the messengers before him to Esau, his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now, and I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have set to my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Then Jacob, greatly afraid and distressed, he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks, and the herds, and the camels into 2 bands, and said, If Esau come to the one company and smite it, and the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God, my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saideth unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy for the least of all the mercies of all the truths which thou hast shewed unto thy servant. For with my staff I pass over this Jordan, and now I become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, and 200 ewes, and 20 rams, and 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 fowls. And he delivered them unto the hands of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put the space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded their foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou, and whitherest goest thou, and whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, Thy be thy servant Jacob's. It is present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, he is behind us. And so he commanded the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau, when ye find him, and say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease with him the present that goeth before me, and afterwards I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. So went present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jacob. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent them over that he had. Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the daybreak. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? He said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him, and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherever it's thou doth ask my name, wherever it is that thou dost ask after my name. And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And he passed over Penuel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and the sinew that shrank. Following his narrow escape from Laban in chapter 31, Jacob turns to his caravan southward towards the homeland, but his relief is instantly cut short by a wave of pure terror. He is marching straight into the territory of his brother Esau, the man who swore to murder him 20 years ago. In Genesis 32, this profound psychological and spiritual masterpiece, it tracks Jacob as he reaches the absolute end of his human resources. Stripped of his tricks, trapped against the river, and paralyzed by fear, Jacob is forced into a literal physical wrestling match with the divine that permanently alters his body, his name, and his destiny. Jacob sends scouts ahead to notify Esau of his return. The scouts sprint back into camp with a catastrophic update. We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. To Jacob, a private army of 400 armed men doesn't look like a welcoming party. It looks like a seek and destroy massacre. Jacob experiences a massive panic attack. He instantly splits from his camp into 2 companies, reasoning that if Esau wipes out one half, the other might escape. Then, for the very first time in the entire Genesis narrative, Jacob prays a raw, desperate prayer based purely on the humility rather than a marketplace bargain. I am not worthy of the least of all mercies. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother and from the hand of Esau, for I fear him. To de-escalate his brother's rage, Jacob curates a massive multi-tiered bribe consisting of over 550 head of livestock, goats, sheep, camels, cattle, and donkey. He sends them across the river in waves, instructing his servants to tell Esau, they be a present sent unto my lord Esau on behalf of he, and behold, he is behind us. In the dead of night, Jacob wakes up, grabs his wife's handmaids and 11 children, and forces them across the rushing, dangerous waters of Fort Jabbok, a deep, rocky canyon flowing into the Jordan River. Once everyone and everything he owns is on the other side, Jacob steps back across the river and drops a chillingly brilliant literary line. Jacob was left alone. For 20 years, Jacob had been surrounded by wives, children, servants, and herds, and now he has deliberately stripped himself of every single earthly buffer. He's completely exposed in pitch black of desert canyon. The moment Jacob is completely isolated, a figure leaps out of the darkness, and the text states, "And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day." This is not a vision or a dream. It's a gritty, grueling, hour-long physical brawl in the mud and the rocks in the canyon floor of the canyon floor. Who is this mysterious man? As the fight progresses, the identity blurs into a profound theophany, the infinite God taking on human form to confront the ultimate human controller. As dawn begins to break, the divine wrestler realizes that Jacob, driven by sheer stubborn survival instinct, will not yield. So the figure executes a supernatural bypass. He reaches down and touches the hollow of Jacob's thigh, instantly popping Jacob's hip out of its joint. Even with a crippled hip and experiencing excruciating white-hot physical pain, Jacob refuses to lose. He wraps his arms tightly around the figure, locking him into a desperate embrace. The figure demands, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." In ancient theology, it took to look upon the unshielded face of God in the full light of day was fatal to a mortal man. Jacob, realizing that his absolute last chance to secure his life, Esau gasped out of an extraordinary defiant line, "I will not let thee go except thou bless me." Jacob, realizing this is his absolute last chance to secure his life against Esau, gasps out an extraordinary defiant line, "I will not let thee go except thou bless me." The wrestler stops and asks a piercing question, "What is thy name?" Thinking about the immense psychological weight of this question, the last time a patriarch asked Jacob his name was 20 years ago, in chapter 27, when his blind father asked, "Whose art thou?" And Jacob lied, "I am Esau," to get the blessing back, and Jacob had to fake his identity. Now, to get his divine blessing, he must confess his true character. He drops his head and states the truth. Jacob, the schemer, the heel catcher. The divine wrestler completely rewrites his essence on the spot. "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and men, and with men hast prevailed." The name Israel in Hebrew carries a profound double meaning based on its linguistic roots. God strives and contends, the reminder that God is the supreme actor. He who strives with God, the monument to Jacob's stubborn endurance. Jacob asks the man for his name, but the figure gently refuses, saying, "Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name?" Instead, he pours out the blessing directly onto the newly minted Israel. As the sun crests over the mountains of Gilead, Jacob names the local Peniel, which translates directly to the face of God, declaring, "For I have seen the face of God, and my life is preserved." The chapter closes with a beautiful, deeply human image in verse 31. "And as he passed over the Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he limped upon his thigh." Jacob had to be physically broken by God in order to be spiritually healed. He enters the Jacob Canyon relying on his own manipulation. He exits the canyon relying entirely on his walking staff as the grace of God. He is finally ready to cross the river and stand face to face with Esau, not as a panicked deceiver, but as a humbled prince of God. Wow. It's intense. He wrestled with God. God broke his hip. Genesis 33. And God lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, with him 400 men, and divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel, and unto the two handmaids. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindered most. And he passed over them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, Who are those with you? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, These are to find grace in the sight of the Lord. Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, for now I have found grace in thy sight. Then receive my present at my hand. Therefore I have seen thy face as though I have seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessings that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, because I have enough. And he urged him, he took it. And he said, Let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto him, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and that the flocks and the herds with the young are with me. And if men should override them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead thee softly according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure until I come unto the Lord unto Seir. And Esau said, Let me now leave thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day unto his way unto Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him an house, and made booths for his cattle. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. And Jacob came to Salim, a city of Smichem, which is in the land of Canaan, which he came from Pandaram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of the field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Harmor, Shem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar and called it Elohim Israel. wasn't expecting that. That's pretty cool. Genesis 33 is the emotional, high stakes resolution of a 20-year family Cold War. Just hours after wrestling with God in the mud of the Jacob Canyon and receiving his new name and a permanent limp in chapter 32, Jacob lifts his eyes and sees the ultimate nightmare materializing on the horizon. Esau is marching directly towards him, flanked by 400 armed men. This chapter is a masterclass in ancient Near Eastern diplomatic choreography, the physical expression of forgiveness, and the subtle ongoing caution of a reformed trickster. Jacob doesn't run away. His newly dislocated hip makes that physically impossible anyways. Instead, he orchestrates his massive family into a highly strategic defensive human shield formation, arranging them by order of his personal affection. The front line, the most exposed, his handmaids and their children. The middle, Leah and her children. The back, the safest position, Rachel and his favorite young son, Joseph. But then Jacob does something completely unprecedented for his character. Instead of hiding safely behind the back crowd like a coward, verse 3 notes that Jacob passes out in front of all of them. He takes the ultimate bullet position, exposing himself first to protect his family. As he approaches the imposing muscular brother, he bows down to the dirt 7 times in a row, the ultimate ancient legal demonstration of absolute political submission to a sovereign king. Jacob is bracing for a flying sword or spear to the chest, but the tensions instantly evaporate in one of the most beautifully shocking verses in the entire Old Testament. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. The 400 armed warriors do not launch an assault. They stand back and watch their fierce, rugged leader melt into pure, tearful joy. Esau's models radical, unburdened forgiveness. He does not bring up the stolen blessings, the lentil soup transaction, or the decades of bitterness. He is just overjoyed to have his little brother back. Once the tears dry, Esau looks up and spots the massive waves of women and children asking, "Who are those with you?" Jacob responds humbly, "The children which God hath graciously given thy servant." The handmaids, Leah, Rachel, and all the children approach the fierce hunter and bow low in deep respect. Then Esau brings up the massive convoy of 550 livestock bribes Jacob had sent across the river in waves. "What meanest thou by all this drove which I met?" Jacob confesses, "These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord." Esau tries to flatly refuse the bribe, demonstrating his own immense wealth and contentment. "I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself." That's pretty awesome. Jacob utterly begins and Jacob utterly begs and panics, insisting that Esau accept the gift as a formal legal sign that their peace treaty is all airtight. In doing so, Jacob delivers an extraordinary, profound line in verse 10. "For therefore I've seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me." Think about the immense theological depth of this statement. Just the night before, Jacob had looked at the terrifying, confrontational face of God at the riverbank Jabbok. Now looking into the eyes of the brother he ripped off, finding absolute, unmerited grace, mercy, and unconditional love instead of murder. Jacob realizes that the grace of a human face reflecting forgiveness is the closest thing a mortal will ever see to the character of God. Esau relents and accepts the gifts. With the reconciliation complete, Esau offers to act as military escort for Jacob's slow-moving caravan. Or at least to have some of his 400 armed warriors behind to protect them from the roadblock to Seir or Edom. Jacob politely but firmly declines the offer. He tells Esau that his children are tender, his flocks are nursing, and if they are driven too hard for even a single day, the livestock will die. He tells Esau, "Let Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly until I come unto my Lord unto Seir." Esau's track marches south towards his territory in Seir. Jacob detours, turns completely around, and heads west to Succoth, and, and then settles in Shechem inside the land of Canaan. This sudden detour demonstrates that Jacob deeply appreciated the forgiveness. He was still Jacob underneath. He was still incredibly cautious, calculating, and hesitant to fully trust his safety inside Esau's direct sphere of influence. He also knew his destiny was anchored to the promised land of Canaan and not the rugged mountains of Edom where Esau lived. Jacob's journey to Succoth builds temporary shelter for his cattle and eventually crosses into buy a plot of land outside the pagan city of Shechem for 100 pieces of silver. He pitches his permanent tents, builds a formal sacrificial altar, and dedicates it to Elohim Israel, God of Israel. By naming the altar after his new identity, Jacob finally publicizes his transformation. He is no longer living under the shadow of his stolen past. He is officially back in the promised land, independent, at peace with his brother, anchored to his divine calling. Through, as chapter 34 will soon prove, settling outside the chaotic pagan city will quickly drag his family into a horrific new nightmare of local violence. This is for sure the best chapter so far, but on to the next. Genesis is long. And Dihon, the daughter of Leah, which she bare, Genesis 34. And Dihon, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. He went to Shechem, the son of the Harmer, the Hivite, the prince of the country, saw her, he took her, and lay with her, and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dihon, the daughter of Jacob. And he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dihon his daughter, and now his sons were with his cattle in the field. And Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Harmon the father of Shechem went out unto Jacob to commune with him, and the sons of Jacob came out to the field when they heard. And the men were grieved, and they were very wroth, because he had wrathfully folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought to not be done. And Harmer communed with them, saying, The soul of Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife, and make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take your daughters unto you. And ye shall dwell within us, and the land shall be before you, and dwell and trade ye therein, and get your possessions therein. And Sechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me I will give. And ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife. And the son of Jacob answered Sechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said, Because he had defiled Dihon their sister. And they said unto them, We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this we will consent unto you, if he will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters unto you, and we will make your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if ye yet not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughters, and we will be gone. And their words pleased Hamor, and Sechem, Hamor's son, and the young man deferred not to do the thing, because he had delighted in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the houses of his father. And Haram and Sechem his son came unto the gate of the city, and communed with the men of the city, saying, These men are peaceable with us, therefore let them dwell in the land, and trade therein for the land. Behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the man consent unto us to dwell with us, to be one people. If every male among us be circumcised, they are circumcised, shall not their cattle, their substance, and every beast of their be ours. Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. And unto Hamor, unto Sechem his son, hearken all that went out of the gate of his city, and every male was circumcised, all that went to the gate of his city. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinhah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Sechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Sechem's house, and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain, and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses, and that which was in the city, that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and all their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, Ye have troubled me to make me stink amongst the inhabitants of the land, amongst the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I flew, and being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me, and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, and my house. And they said, Should he deal with our sisters as with an harlot? Genesis 34 is one of the most violent, disturbing, and raw chapters of the entire Old Testament. The records It records a horrific breakdown of civic boundaries and brutal sexual assault, and a catastrophic vigilante massacre that permanently shapes the legacy of Jacob's older sons. Literally and historically, this chapter serves as a tragic warning about the dangers of the covenant family attempting to assimilate or compromise with the surrounding pagan cultures of Canaan. Here's a deep context behind the dark tragedy at Sechem. At the end of chapter 33, instead of traveling directly to Bethel to fulfill his vow with God, Jacob decides to settle down right at the outskirts of Shechem and a thriving, sophisticated Canaanite city. He buys a plot of land and pitches a tent nearby. Verse 1 introduces Gihon, Jacob's only recorded daughter, born of Leah in chapter 30. The text notes that she goes out to see the daughter of the land. This innocent phrase indicates that the family was interacting socially and casually towards the local pagan population. Gihon walks into the city unescorted, exposing herself to a culture that does not share the same moral boundaries of her family's faith. The prince of the city, a young man named Sechem, the city was named after his family, sees Deha, a target, and violently attacks her. Verse 2 uses a threefold progressive verbal assault to describe the horrific event. He saw her, he took her, he humbled her, meaning violated or raped. Following the assault, the text notes a bizarre psychological twist. Sechem, deeply obsessed with Dinah, his soul cleaves to her. He falls in love with her, and he keeps her trapped inside his palace. He runs to his wealthy father, King Hamor, demanding, "Get me this damsel to wife." When Jacob hears that his daughter has been defiled, his response is shockingly passive. He keeps silent and does nothing until his son returns from working in the cattle fields. When his brothers find out, when the brothers find out, they are hit with a wave of grief and pure blinding rage because Sechem had wrathfully folly in Israel, which things ought not to be done. King Harmor and Prince Sechem march out of Jacob's camp to negotiate a settlement. They offer a massive blank check dowry, pitching a grand globalistic plan of integration. "Make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and ye shall dwell with us, shall and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein." To the Canaanites, this was standard pragmatic business deal to merge empires, but to the covenant family, the simulation would mean the total extinction of their unique spiritual identity. Jacob's older son, led by Leah's fiercest boys, Simeon and Levi, completely take over the negotiations from their passive father. The text notes that they answer to the Canaanite royals deceitfully. They state that they can only agree to intermarry, and trade within the city if the single male Sechem undergoes circumcision to match the brand mark of Abraham's covenant. King Haran, or King Hamor and Prince Sechem, entirely driven by the prospect of acquiring Jacob's immense wealth and herds, agree to the terms. They march back into the city square and convince every man in the city to submit to painful surgical operation. Then comes the brutal, calculated ambush in verse 25. "And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that the two sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males." In an ancient medical reality, the third day after an adult circumcision is the absolute peak of physical inflammation, localized swelling, and blinding pain. The men in the city were completely immobilized, feverish, and unable to lift a weapon to defend themselves. Simeon and Levi commit cold-blooded tactical slaughter. They execute King Hamor and Prince Sechem and rescue their sister Dinah from the palace and drag her back to camp. Following the execution, the rest of Jacob's sons swoop in like vultures to systematically loot and plunder the entire city, stealing their sheep and oxen, donkeys, wealth, and taking all the local women and children as captive slaves. The chapter closes in a deep, broken note. A deeply bitter, broken note, Jacob absolutely horrified by the slaughter. But notice the specific nature of his rebuke to Simeon and Levi in verse 30. Ye have troubled me to make me to stink amongst the inhabitants of the land. And I begin few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. Jacob doesn't condemn the massacre based on the morality or justice. He panics based on the public relations and personal safety. He is terrified of retaliatory invasion by the surrounding Canaanite tribes. Simeon and Levi fire back with a fierce, cutting moral defense that leaves their father in absolute silence. Shouldn't he deal with our sister as with an harlot? Genesis 34 leaves the covenant family sitting in a toxic pool of blood, compromised integrity, and a pending war. Simeon and Levi weaponized a sacred divine covenant sign, circumcision, to execute a deceptive mass murder. When you step into chapter 35, God is going to break his silence to the issue and issue an emergency evacuation order. He will tell Jacob to quit stalling, pack up the compromised camp, and finally march to Bethel to clean up his family's spiritual baggage. I'm worried I'm getting a little bit of weird feedback. I'm going to switch mics real quick. Testing. Testing. Noise suppression. All right. All right. Going into Genesis 35. All right, Genesis 35, an altar to God. And God said unto Jacob, Rise, go to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar of God that appeared unto thee when thou fled from the face of Esau thy brother. This might be a little too loud. And make there an altar unto God, and appear unto thee when thou fled from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob unto his household, and told to all that there were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you. All right, let me restart that. Genesis 35. And then said unto Jacob, Arise and go to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto thee when thou fled from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the days of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earnings which were in their ears, all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid under the oak which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz, which is the land of Canaan, and that is Bethel, and he and all the people that were with him, and all he built there an altar, and called the place El Bethel, because their God appeared unto them. When he fled from the face of his brother, but Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak. And the name of it was called Elon Bachuth. And God appeared unto Jacob again, when he came out of the Pandaram, and blessed him. God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name is Jacob, and thy shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall thy name be. Sorry, hold on 1 second. But Israel shall thy name be. And he called his name Israel. And the God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply, and a company of nations shall be thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which gave Abraham and Isaac to thee, I will give to thee, and thy seed after thee will be given to the land. And God went up from his place. My apologies. All right. And God went up from his place, and in the place where he had talked with him, and God set up a pillar in the place where he walked with him, and even a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him Bethel. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come from Ephrath. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass when she was in hard labor that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Benion, Benoni. But his father called him Benjamin. That was an epic save. Couldn't pronounce that. And Rachel died and was buried in the way of Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel, grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed
and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it now. Now the sons of Jacob were 12, and the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun, the sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan, Naphtali, and the sons of Zipplath, and Leah's handmaids, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Pandaram. And Jacob came unto Isaac and his father. And Jacob come unto Isaac his father unto Meriam, unto a city of Abraham, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180, and Isaac gave up the ghost and died and gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his son Esau and Jacob buried him. Following the horrific, bloody slaughtering and looting at Shechem in chapter 34, Jacob's family is in an absolute spiritual security crisis. They're surrounded by hostile Canaanite nations, sitting on a pile of stolen pagan loot, and paralyzed by the fear of retaliatory war. It is at this rock bottom moment of crisis that God breaks his silence. Genesis 35 is an emergency chapter of spiritual house cleaning, reconciliation, and profound grief. If it tracks the physical deaths of an old era and prepares the family for the next grand narrative cycle, God steps into the camp and issues a direct command to Jacob in verse 1. Arise and go to Bethel and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appears unto thee when thou'st fled from the face of Esau thy brother. God tells Jacob, stop stalling and go back to the exact location where he slept on a rock pillow 30 years ago in chapter 28. Before Jacob can lead his family onto the holy ground, he has to deal with the rampant idolatry infecting his camp. Jacob issued a strict command to his massive estate. Put away the strange gods that are among you, including Laban's stolen teraphim. Be clean and change your garments. Shed the blood-stained clothes of Shem's loot. The family surrendered all foreign idols and expansive pagan earrings, which were used as good luck charms and fertility amulets. Jacob takes the whole pile of occult baggage and buries it deep under an oak tree near Shechem. They bury their past before moving toward their future. As a massive caravan begins to march up into the mountain passes towards Bethel, they are completely vulnerable to a military ambush surrounding the Canaanite tribes. But verse 5 records a supernatural shield. They are journeyed, and their terror of God was upon the cities that were around them, and they did not pursue after their sons of Jacob. God downshifts a profound psychological dread into the hearts of the local warlords, ensuring compromised families get a free pass to safety. Jacob arrives at Bethel and builds a formal altar. He renames the site El Bethel, the God of the house of God. It is here that God appears to him again, explicitly reconfirming his new name Israel and renewing the grand cosmic blessings of kings, nations, and land. The spiritual high of Bethel is immediately shattered by devastating personal tragedy on the road south towards Ephrath, Bethlehem. Rachel, Jacob's ultimate first love, goes into hard, agonizing labor with her second biological child. As her life is slipping away in the final moments of delivery, she looks at the newborn boy and names him Biani, which translates directly to son of my sorrow. But Jacob, unwilling to let his favorite wife's final words stamp a permanent curse of grief onto the boy's identity, renames the infant Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand, representing strength and honor. Unlike Sarah, Abraham, and Isaac, who were buried in formal family vault at the cave of Hebron, Rachel dies on the side of the highway. Jacob buries her right there on the road to Bethlehem and sets up a prominent stone pillar over her grave. Shortly after Rachel's burial, the family pitches their tents past the Tower of Edar. It is here that the oldest son, Reuben, commits a shocking, quiet act of domestic treason. He sleeps with Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, and Jacob's concubine. While the text notes that Israel heard it and kept quiet for a moment, this structural grab for power will ultimately cost Reuben his firstborn birthright when Jacob hands out his final deathbed blessings at the end of the book. Despite the intense dysfunction, the narrator takes a profound pause in verse 22 through 26 to formally list the full, complete destruction of the family. The 12 sons of Jacob, organized cleanly by their respective mothers, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. The chapter comes to a formal, peaceful close, with Jacob finally traveling to Hebron to see his aging father, Isaac. At 180 years old, Isaac, beneath his last breath, he breathes his last breath and dies. Behold, old and full of days, just like the beautiful reconciliation we saw with Abraham's funeral in chapter 25, verse 29, notes that Isaac is buried inside the cave of Machpelah by both Jacob and Esau. Wow. The two rival brothers stand side by side once again in shared grief to lay their father to rest. With Isaac's era officially closed, Esau's massive genealogy will be mapped out in chapter 36, clearing the deck completely for chapter 37, where the narrative lens will pivot permanently towards the chaotic, multicolored coat drama of Rachel's oldest boy, Joseph. Wow. Esau's descendants. Now these generations of Esau, who is Edom, Esau took his wives of daughters of Canaan, Adath, the daughter of Elon Hittite, and Ablohima, and daughter of Anan, the daughter of Zebah, and Hivite, and Bashem, and Ishmael's daughter and sister of Nebajoth, and Abda bare to Esau, Ifliza, and Bashemeth bare Reuel, and Ablohima bare Jesush, and Jamalem, and Korah, and these sons of Esau, which were born unto him in the land of Canaan. And Esau took his wives, and his sons, and his daughters, and all of the persons of his house, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance, which he had gotten from the land of Canaan, and went into the country to face his brother Jacob. For their riches were more than that they might dwell together, and the land wherein their strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in their Seir. Esau is Edom, and the great generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's son: Epelath, the son of Adath, the wife of Esau; Renewel, the son of Bashem, the wife of Esau; and the son of Ephalath were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenza. And Timon was concubine to Ephazah, Esau's son, and she bare to Ephazak Amalek. These were the sons of Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Renewel, Naphath, and Zerah, and Shama, Ha, and Mizah, Ha, and were the sons of Beshem, Esau's wife. And these were the sons of Ablahim, and the daughter of Anahah, and the daughter of Zebahan, and Esau's wife. And she bare Esau Jeshua and Jamalam and Korah. And these were the dukes of the sons of Esau, the sons of Ephazaph, the firstborn son of Esau, Duke Timon, Duke Omar, Duke Zipho, Duke Kenaz, Duke Korah, Duke Gatam, Duke Amalek. These are the dukes that came of Ephazaph in the land of Edom. These were the sons of Adath, and these are the sons of Rahul, Zisan's sons, Duke of Nazath, Duke of Zerah, Duke of Shema, Duke of Mizah. These are the dukes that came to the rule of the land of Edom. These are the sons of Besem, Esau's wife, and these are the sons of Ablahim, Esau's wife, Duke of Jesua, Duke of Jamala, Duke of Korha. These were the dukes that came of the Aholi Bahama, the daughter of Anua, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom. These are Ether's dukes. These are the sons of Sehir, Horite, who inhabited the land, Lotan, Shabal, Zibeon, Anah, Dison, Ezra, Disan. These are the dukes of Horites, the children of Seir in the land of Edom, the children of Lotan, where Horai and Hema. Lotan's sister were Teman, and the children of Shabal were these Alvin, Menhantha, and Ebal, Sipho, Iman. And these are the children of Zebayon, both Ajah, Anah, and that was Anah that found the meals in the wilderness as he fed the asses of Zibeon his father. And the children of Anah were Dishon, Abalohama, the daughter of Anan. These are the children of Dishon, Hedemen, Ishaban, Ithran, Shiran, children of Ezer, and these Balan, Zivan, and Akan. And the children of Dishon, these Uz, Aran, and the dukes that came from the Horites, the Duke Slotan, Duke Shabal, Duke Zibeon, Duke Anan, Duke Dishon, Duke Ezra, Duke Dishan. These were the dukes that came from Horai among the dukes in the land of Sehir. These are the kings that reigned into the land of Edom before the reign of any king over the children of Israel. The Belahah, the son of Behor, reigned Edom. The name of the city was Dinhabah. The Bela died, and Jobahah, the son of Zerah, Bohazah, resigned in his stead, and Jobah died, and Husham of the land of Tigaraman Tamani resigned in his stead instead, and Hushma died, and Hadad, the son of Bahad, who smote Medan in the field of Moab, resigned in his stead, and his name, the city of Avith. Hadath died. Salam of Masgareth resigned in his stead, and Salim died, or Salamha died, and Saul Ribroth by the river resigned in his stead, and Saul died, and Hanan, the son of Achbor, resigned in his stead, and Balal Hanan, the son of the Achbor, died, and Hadar reigned in his stead, and the name of his city was Pau, and his wife's name was Methabel, and the daughter of Matrid, and the daughter of Mesahab. And these are the names of the dukes that came of Esau according to their families after their places by the names Duke Timon, Duke Alva, Duke Jerath, Duke Ablohima, Duke Elan, Duke Penun, Duke Kenza, Duke Timon, Duke Mizbar, Duke Magdiel, Duke Aram. These be the dukes of Edom according to their inhabitants in the land of their possession. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites. I probably butchered like most of those names. I apologize. Trying my best over here. In Genesis 36, those chapters are the modern day readers of the author of Skim because it looked as though It looked like a dense wall of unpronounceable ancient names. However, the ancient Israelite audience reading this in later history, this chapter was an explosive, high stakes piece of geopolitical, military, and historical context. Literally, Genesis 36 served as a formal closing of all the books of Esau. Throughout Genesis, whenever God chose a specific line for his covenant blessing, like Abraham or Isaac, the narrative takes a brief pause to map out the secular, non-covenant branch of the family before focusing on the exclusively on the chosen line. This chapter systematically tracks how Esau's massive family tree evolved from a non-nomadic camp into a highly organized, heavily fortified political superpower known as the nation of Edom. The chapter opens up reconfirming Esau's famous nickname Esau, who is Edom, recalling the red lentil soup incident from chapter 25. Verse 6 through 8 records a massive, peaceful economic migration that mirrors the split between Abraham and Lot back in chapter 13. Esau gathers his Canaanite and Ishmaelitic wives, his children, his servants, his staggering herds of livestock, and the moves completely out of the land into the Canaan, into the rugged hill country of Mount Seir. Economic stagnation trap. The text notes that they had to separate because their riches were more than that they might dwell together. And the land therein that they were strangers could not bear them because their cattle. The sheer physical volume of livestock owned by Jacob and Esau would have completely decimated the grazing pastures and the water tables of Canaan if they had stayed together. Esau does not settle in the Mount Seir. His descendants completely take it over. Mount Seir is a brutally rugged mountainous region running south of the Dead Sea down to the Gulf of Aqaba, modern-day southern Jordan. The original inhabitants, the Horites, ancient cave dwellers led by Seir, and the Edomite invasion, Esau's descendants marry into and conquer and systematically replace the Horites built to Edom. Verses 20 through 30, the indigenous Horite chiefs show exactly who Esau's family intermarried with and conquered. By securing this high elevation, rocky terrain, the Edomites gained total control over the critical, highly lucrative, ancient international trade known as the King's Highway. Anyone wanting to move copper, incense, or spices between Egypt, Arabia, and Mesopotamia had to pay a hefty transit tax to Esau's family. The most fascinating element of Genesis 36 is how it charts the rapid political development of Edom. The author breaks down the societal structure into three distinct evolutionary phases. Phase 1, the clan, the immediate sons and grandsons of Esau, the chief, the dukes, Hebrew, and tribal military commandants, and the king, the highly organized central monarchy. Verse 31 drops a highly famous, heavy-hitting chronological statement that served as a massive gut punch to the original Israelite settlers, readers, and these are the kings that reigned the land of Edom before the reign of any king over the children of Israel. While Jacob's descendants were walking down into Egypt to spend 4 centuries trapped in grueling, impoverished, iron furnace slavery, Esau's descendants were already building palaces, minting currencies. Jacob's descendants were walking down into Egypt to spend 4 centuries trapped in grueling, impoverished iron furnace slavery. Esau's descendants were already building palaces, minting currencies, fortifying stone cities, and running an organized sovereign monarchy. Edom became a superpower long before Israel had even had a functional army. When you look closely at the list of the 8 kings of Edom, verses 32 through 39, the fascinating political reality jumps out. None of these kings succeeded their fathers. King Balal dies, Jobab becomes king. King Jobab dies, Husham becomes king. Every single king comes from a completely different city and a completely different family tree. This proves that ancient Edom did not operate on a hereditary dynasty like Israel later would. Instead, they operated on an elective military monarchy. The regional tribal chiefs would gather together and vote or fight to install the strongest, most capable warlord to rule the kingdom. Genesis 36 closes by listing a primary geographic center of the Edomites' dukes, including the names like Teman, the famous in the Old Testament for producing world-class philosophers and sages like Job's friend Eliphaz. By mapping out Esau's explosive growth, Genesis sets up a massive, bloody geopolitical war that will dominate the rest of Old Testament history. During the Exodus, Edom will violently deploy their army to block Israel from crossing their borders. Numbers 20, King Saul, King David, King Solomon will fight brutal, high-stakes wars to conquer and subdue the Edomite fortress. Prophets like Abdillah and Malachi will deliver intense oracles of judgment against Edom for betraying their brothers Israel during the foreign invasions. With Esau's sovereign superpowers borders firmly established and checked off the itinerary list, the text completely shuts the door on Edom. When you turn the page to chapter 37, the lens drops all international political zones straight back into the single, highly dysfunctional tenant in Canaan, where 17-year-old boy named Joseph is about to put on a multicolored coat. All right. Genesis 37. And Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the livestock with his brethren, and the lad was with the son of Bilhah and with the son of Ziplath and his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that his father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and he could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in fields, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obedience for my sheaf. And the brethren said to him, Thou shalt indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, and his father observed the saying. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will see thee unto them. And he said to them, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with thy flocks, and bring me the word again. So he sent him to the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, Seekest thou? He said, I seeketh my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. The man said, They departed hence, and for I heard them say, Let us go down to Dothan. And Joseph sent after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay. And they came, and they said one to another, Behold, this dreameth cometh, and come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat, and his coat of many colors that was with him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water. And they sat down to eat the bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites that came to Gilead with their camels, bringing spice and balm and myrrh, and going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is this if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let he not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content, and then there passed the Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rented his clothes, and he returned unto his brethren, and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat, and killed the kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, This have we found, know now whether it be thy son coat or no. He knew it, and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put a sack upon his loins, and mourned his son for many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and said, For I will go into the grave unto my son's mourning. Thus his father wept for him, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt until Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Genesis 37 launches the fourth and final major narrative cycle of the book of Genesis, the story of Joseph. Literally, this chapter is a masterpiece of psychological tension, foreshadowing escalating family dysfunction. It marks the definitive shift from the generational wandering of the patriarchs to the tightly woven narrative that explains how the tiny clan of Israel ended up migrating down into Egypt. The tragedy of chapter 37 is that the sins of the past are perfectly mirrored in the next generation. That's deep. The sins of the past are perfectly mirrored in the next generation. Jacob, who deceived to the tear of his own Jacob, who used deception to tear his own family apart, now sees his family torn apart by his son's bitter deception. The chapter opens with Jacob, Israel, settling down permanently in Canaan. Instantly, the narrative exposes glaring, dangerous flaw within the household. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. Jacob walked straight into the exact same destructive parenting trap his parents Isaac and Rebekah fell into in chapter 25. Joseph, the firstborn son of his favorite deceased wife Rachel, and Jacob openly treats him like royalty. 17-year-old Joseph acts as a spy, bringing tales of his brother's misdeed to Jacob. Jacob gives Joseph a Kenthonet Pesim, a long-sleeved, richly embroidered royal tunic, and Joseph brags about the cosmic vision, absolute supremacy over his family. The text denotes a devastating breakdown of communication in verse 4. When the brothers saw the blatant favoritism, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Every single greeting in the camp was toxic. Instead of keeping a low profile, Joseph pours rocket fuel onto his brother's simmering rage by reciting two vivid prophetic dreams. The agricultural vision binding sheaves of wheat into the field when suddenly Joseph's sheaves stand completely upright and his brother's sheaves form a circle in the bow down flat to it. And then dream 2, the celestial vision. This time the stakes are cosmic. The sun and the moon and the 11 stars representing his father, mother, and brothers bow down to Joseph. Even his indulgent father, Jacob, has to step in and rebuke him for his pride. Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow ourselves to thee, to the earth? But while the brothers let their jealousy morph into murderous intent, the narrator drops a brilliant, quiet detail. But his father observed the saying. Jacob remembered what it was like to receive shocking countercultural prophecy of his own youth. Somehow later, the older brothers take the family flock north to see the pastures of the land around Shechem, the bloody site of the massacre in chapter 34. Jacob sends Joseph 50 miles on a solo trek to spy on them and bring them back into another progress report. While Joseph approaches their camp near Dothan, wearing his brightly distinctive royal tunic, the brothers spot him from far away. The text records a chilling, sarcastic response. Behold, the dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him. The older brothers split into different camps on how to handle the murder plot. Reuben's plan, driven by his desperate need to regain his father's favor after his sexual misconduct in chapter 35, Reuben steps in to stop the execution. He tells them not to shed blood and throw Joseph into a deep, empty, watered cistern, secretly planning to sneak back later to rescue the boy. The moment Joseph walks into camp, they launch a violent assault. They rip the royal multicolored coat off his body and throw him into the dry, dark pit. Then, demonstrating an absolutely chilling level of sociopathic empathy, verse 25 notes, and they sat down to eat bread while their teenage brother is screaming and begging for his life from the bottom of a dark pit. They calmly eat their lunch. As they are eating, a large international commercial caravan of Ishmaelites and Midianites appear on the horizon. They are traveling down to the king's highway of Gilead to Egypt, their camels loaded with a high value of resinous balms and myrrh. Judah, the fourth-born brother, who will become the dominant tribal voice, sees a pragmatic, highly lucrative financial alternative to murder. What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. The brothers agree to the corporate transaction. They drag Joseph out of a pit and sell him to the merchants for 20 pieces of silver. The standard ancient Near Eastern legal market price for a young underage slave, as documented in the Code of Hammurabi. When Reuben returns to the pit later, he finds it's empty. He tears his clothes in an absolute panic, crying, "The child is not, and I, where shall I go?" To hide the horrific crime, the brothers orchestrate an elaborate, calculated deception that perfectly mirrors the sin of their father's past. They march back home, present the blood-soaked tunic, shredded royal tunic to Jacob, and ice-coldly ask him to identify it. This we have found, known whether it be thy son's coat or not. Jacob falls directly into the mental trap. He leads out a primal scream of absolute heartbreak. It is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Jacob tears his clothes, puts on a sackcloth, and enters a state of inconsolable, pathological grief. When his son and his daughters try to comfort him, he completely rejects them, declaring, "For I will go down into the grave unto my son's mourning." Genesis 37 ends a stark cinematic split screen in canon. Jacob is wept into the dirt, completely broken by a massive lie. Meanwhile, down in Africa, the final verse drops the vital piece of administrative context that will launch the entire next era of biblical history. And the Midianites sold him to Egypt, onto Pothar, the office of the Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. The dreamer has officially been dropped into the dark years of the Egyptian empire, but as the rest of the story will reveal, the brothers did not destroy his dreams. They accidentally acted as the exact human vehicles needed to fulfill them. All right. Genesis 38, tribal history. And it came to pass at the time that Judah went down to his brethren and turned into a certain Admolite whose name was Hirath. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Sudah. And he took her and went unto her, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and his name was Shelah. And he was at Chezib when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, for whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, Go unto my brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass when he went unto his brother's wife, and spilled it onto the ground, lest he should give his seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, for wherefore he slew him also. Then said Judah to Tamar's daughter-in-law, Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shillam my son be grown, for he said, Lest peradventure he die, also as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in the process of time, the daughter of Shuhad, Judah's wife, died, and Judah confronted and went unto his shepherd to Timrath. He and his friends, Hirathite and Adammelite. And it was told to Tamar, Behold, thy father-in-law goeth and Timrath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garment from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which by the way to Timnath, for she saw what Shelah had grown. She was not forgiven unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought to her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face, and to turn unto her by the way, and said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give thee? And she said, Thy signet, thy bracelets, thy staff, that is thine hand. And he gave it to her, and he came in unto her, she conceived by him. And she rose and went away, and laid her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend Adammelite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Then he asked the men of the place, saying, Where is thou harlot that was openly by wayside? And they said, There was no harlot in his place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, Let her take it to her, lest we be shamed, Behold, I send this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told to Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she was with the child by whoredom. And Judah said, Bring forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man whose these are, I am with child. And she said, Discern, I pray thee, those who are these, the signet, the bracelets, and the staff. Judah acknowledged them and said, She hath been more righteous than I, because I gave her not Selah my son, and he knew her again no more. And it came to pass that in the time of her travail, that behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took bound upon his hand scarlet thread, saying, This came out first. And it came to pass as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. She said, How's thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name shall be Pharez. And after came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was Zahara. Genesis 38 is one of the most abrupt, shocking, and seemingly bizarre interpretations of the Old Testament. Just as chapter 37 hooks you with a massive cliffhanger, Joseph being sold as a slave down to Egypt, the narrator suddenly puts brakes on the story and shifts the camera entirely away from Joseph and sends an entire chapter tracking the scandalous decades-long moral collapse and messy family drama of his older brother Judah. To the modern reader, it looks like a misplaced filler episode, but to the ancient reader, Genesis 38 is a theological and genealogical masterpiece. It demonstrates how God can take a completely broken family line and overrule human failure to preserve the ultimate royal bloodline of the future Messiah. Here is the deep context, step-by-step breakdown of Judah and Tamar. The chapter opens with Judah performing a dangerous spiritual cultural drift. Judah went down from his brethren. He literally packs up his tents, leaves the safety of the covenant of family camp, and moves in with an Adamite pagan named Hira. While living in his Canaanite environment, Judah spots the daughter of a local merchant named Shua, marries her, and fathers 3 consecutive sons, Onan, and Shelah. As the boys grow up, Judah acts as the patriarch and recruits a local woman named Tamar to be the bride for his firstborn son, Instantly, the family hits a wall of dark spiritual rebellion. The text notes that the firstborn son, was so profoundly wicked in the sight of the Lord that God personally steps in and strikes him dead. This leaves Tamar a vulnerable, childless widow in a brutal patriarchal society. To protect her, Judah invokes a foundational ancient Near Eastern custom known as Levirate marriage, and later confided in Israelite law, Deuteronomy 25. The Levirate marriage law: if a married man dies childless, his brother must sleep with the widow. The firstborn son from that union is legally credited to the deceased brother's name, ensuring the family line and property inheritance survives. Judah commands his second son, Onan, to perform this duty for Tamar. But Onan models ultimate greed and exploitation. He knows that if he fathers a child with Tamar, that child will inherit prime birthright property instead of him. So Onan repeatedly abuses the arrangement, using withdrawal to avoid impregnating her while using her body. Wow. God views this exploitation of vulnerable women as entirely evil, and strikes Onan dead as well. Probably say that's called for. With 2 sons dead in a row, the superstitious superstitious Judah panics. Instead of looking at his son's internal wickedness, he blames Tamar, threatening her like a black widow's curse. He lies to her, telling her to go as a widow in her family's house until the youngest boy, Thelha, grows up to marry her. But Judah has absolutely no intention of ever risking his last surviving son's life on her. Tamar is effectively frozen out of society, left childless, husbandless, and trapped in legal limbo with no future. Years pass. Shelah grows into full adulthood, and Tamar realizes she has become completely conned and abandoned by Judah. Then Judah's wife dies, and the mourning period is over. Judah travels to the town of Timnath for an annual sheep herding festival, a wild event notorious for heavy drinking and loose morals. Tamar decides to take justice into her own hands. She sheds her distinct clothes of widowhood, blankets her entire face in thick, deceptive veil, and sits down directly at the crossroads leading to Timnath. Judah walks by her, sees her, assumes she is a temple prostitute. He approaches her and demands a transaction. Tamar, operating in brilliant legal trap, forces him into a negotiation. Judah offers a young goat from his flock, but he does not have it on him. Tamar demands 3 pieces of personal identification as a collateral until the goat arrives: his signet ring, his cord, and his staff. Judah casually hands over his entire legal identity just to satisfy his immediate lust. He sleeps with her and walks away. Tamar packs up her veil, puts her widow clothes back on, and slips away completely pregnant. When Judah tries to send a servant back with a goat to recover his ring and staff, the local tells him there was never a prostitute at the crossroads. 3 months later, word reaches Judah's camp: Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and has also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. Judah instantly explodes with self-righteous, hypocritical fury. Exercising his harsh patriarchal power, he commands bringing her forth and let her be burnt. He is ready to execute her, to scrub the shame from his family tree. They drag Tamar out into the public square. But as she is being led to the fire, she holds up the 3 pieces of evidence she took from the crossroads. She delivers a chilling, quiet line to her father-in-law: by the man whose these are, I am with child. Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet, the bracelets, and the staff? Judah looks at the ring, the scepter, and freezes. He is caught in an absolute checkmate. He has to look into the mirror and realize that he is the criminal who defiled her. He is the reason she is forced into the desperate act. Judah breaks down and confesses the ultimate verdict of the chapter: she has been more righteous than I, but that I give her not to Shelam my son. Judah acknowledges his massive systematic failure. He drops the execution charge, protects her, and the text notes he never slept with her again. When the delivery day arrives, Tamar gives birth to 2 twin boys, Perez and Zerah. The birth mirrors the dramatic wrestling match of Jacob and Esau. Zerah puts his hands out first, and the midwife ties a crimson thread around his wrist to mark the firstborn. The baby pulls his hand back inside the womb, and his brother violently bursts past him to be firstborn. The midwife gasps, "How hast thou broken forth?" So they name him Perez, which means the breacher or the breaker. Why did the author of Genesis force us through this uncomfortable, scandalous detour right in the middle of Joseph's story? Because of Perez. If you fast forward through history to the very end of the Old Testament, the book of Ruth, and open the very first page of the New Testament, the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew 1, you'll find that this chaotic, messy union between Judah and Tamar is the exact line that produces King David and Jesus Christ. Furthermore, this chapter sets up a massive psychological transformation for Judah. In chapter 37, Judah was cold-hearted human trafficker who casually sold his little brother for a handful of silver. By the time we get to the end of the Genesis story, Judah will have been so fundamentally humbled by this experience with Tamar that he will voluntarily offer to lay down his own life as a slave to protect his younger brother Benjamin. With Judah's pride thoroughly broken and his messianic bloodline supernaturally secured, Genesis 39 pivots the lens straight back down to Egypt, where Joseph is about to face his own high-stakes test inside Pothar's house. Wow. This chaotic, messy union between Judah and Tamar is the exact line that produces King David and Jesus Christ. Wow. Genesis 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an office of the Pharaoh, captain of the guard, and Egyptian, brought him the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw the Lord with him, and that Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him oversee his house and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him oversee his house and all over that he had, the Lord had blessed the Egyptian house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that had Joseph hand, and he had not aught he had saved the bread in which he did eat. And Joseph was a godly person and was well favored. And it came to pass after all these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wrought not what is with me in this house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and he was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto him, saying, he hath brought in Hebrew unto us. that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, He hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and cried with a loud voice. And came to pass, when he heard I had lifted up my voice and cried, that he had left his garment with me and fled and got him out. She laid his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took to him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and where he was there with the Lord. And he was there in the prison, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were there in the prison, and whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Genesis 39 brings us right back to the fast-paced cinematic narrative of Joseph, inserting the messy moral spiral of Judah in chapter 38 just before the author creates the brilliant international character contrast. While Judah is up in Canaan, compromising his integrity with locals at the crossroads, Joseph is down in pagan Egypt, isolated from his family, facing a masterclass in temptation, and holding the line of personal holiness flawlessly. This chapter tracks Joseph's rapid rise with the Egyptian empire and a devastating false accusation and subsequent plunge into a maximum security dungeon. The narrative opens with Joseph being brought from the slave market by Potiphar, a wealthy executive who serves as Pharaoh's captain of the guard. Joseph is traumatized. 17-year-old foreigner stripped of his royal coat and family identity, yet the narrator anchors his entire survival to a powerful repeating structural theme, and the Lord was with Joseph. Joseph starts as an entry-level slave in the fields. Potiphar notices that everything Joseph touches supernaturally prospers. Joseph is promoted to chief estate manager, running Potiphar's entire empire. Potiphar hands over the total administrative control over his finances, properties, and household to Joseph. The text notes that the things are running so smoothly that Potiphar does not have to worry about a single detail on his calendar except the bread in which he did not eat, a cultural idiom meaning his personal, private, domestic affairs. Verse 6 drops a crucial literary pivotal note. And Joseph was a goodly person and well-favored. This is the exact same Hebrew phrase used to describe his mother, Rachel, back in chapter 39. He inherited her striking physical beauty and athletic build. This good looks targeted him for trouble. Potiphar's wife notices a young manager and launches a relentless, aggressive campaign of sexual harassment. She approaches him with a blunt, predatory demand, "Lie with me." Joseph flatly refuses her invitation, offering an incredibly sophisticated, ethically airtight defense that operates on 3 distinct levels. He points out that Potiphar has trusted him implicitly, withheld absolutely nothing from him except his wife. To sleep with her would be the ultimate corporate betrayal of his boss. He notes that she is fundamentally another man's wife. Joseph utters the defining line of his character in verse 9, how they can do this great wickedness and sin against God. Notice that Joseph does not view adultery as a victimless social hookup or a minor mistake. He views it as a direct cosmic assault against the holiness of Yahweh. Despite his firm boundary, she does not back down. She traps him in daily whispering the invitation over and over while he systematically avoids even being in the same room with her. The crisis reaches a boiling point on the day when the entire Egyptian staff is out on the villa for a festival holiday. Joseph walks into the quiet house to audit the books, and Popthar's wife springs a physical ambush. She grabs him tightly by his garment, screaming, "Lie with me." Faced with predatory physical assault, Joseph realizes that trying to talk his way out of is a losing strategy. He performs the ultimate act of spiritual survival. He slips completely out of his tunic, leaves the clothes behind in her hands, and sprints naked or underdressed out into the open courtyard. Furious at the act of being rejected, Popthar's wife instantly flips the script from seduction to a malicious cover-up. She holds onto Joseph's garment like a piece of forensic evidence and screams for the local guards. She crafts a highly calculated, racially charged lie to protect her public status. See, he hath brought me in a Hebrew, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. When Popthar arrives home from his shift at the palace, she delivers the exact same performance to him, framing Joseph as an ungrateful, predatory immigrant. The text notes that Popthar's wrath was greatly kindled. However, the understanding of an ancient Egyptian legal history reveals a massive piece of hidden context. Popthar does not execute Joseph. Under ancient Egyptian law, a slave who attempted to rape a high-ranking nobleman's wife was automatically executed on the spot via impalement or beheading. The fact that Popthar merely sentenced Joseph to the king's prison, the white-collar jail for a political prisoner managed by Popthar himself, strongly implies that Popthar knew his wife's reputation. Suspected the narrative was fraud, he had locked Joseph up to preserve his own political face and marital peace. The chapter comes to a close by dropping Joseph into a dark subterranean prison. The dreamer has officially hit a new low, terrifying low point. The moment Joseph hits the floor of the dungeon, the narrator brings back the grand, unyielding theme of the entire cycle in verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Inside Popthar's house, God made Joseph chief manager of the villa. Inside the king's prison, God made Joseph the warden over all the inmates. Joseph's integrity, emotional intelligence, and administrative balance Joseph's integrity, emotional intelligence, and administrative brilliance shine through even in the dungeon. The head jailer realizes Joseph is completely incorruptible and hands over the keys to the entire prison yard, trusting Joseph to run the daily logistics of the facility. Genesis 39 serves as a profound monument to the staggering spiritual reality. God's presence is not dependent on your location or your comfort. Whether Joseph is wearing a royal tunic in Canaan, a manager's robe in a mansion, or iron shackles in a dark dungeon, he remains a free prince of God because his character is entirely anchored to the unseen creator. With Joseph now running the logistics of the royal prison, the stage is perfectly set for chapter 40, where two of the Pharaoh's top cabinet members are about to get locked up inside his block. I'm going to call it, come back later.